You found your place for the night. The tension in your shoulders drops. The atmosphere feels controlled and steady, like a base that's finally powered down. Outside your walls, the universe is wide and indifferent. In here, everything is stable. Tonight's story comes with the calm that follows long hours on duty. Quiet, steady, and made for sleep. Everything feels distant now, like a base settling into its night cycle. The story ahead drifts in at that same slow rhythm. Let's step into it. They say it helps to talk it through. The site tech left the recorder on the tray and told me to speak until the light went green. When it goes green, the system has enough material for evaluation. That is how they phrased it. Material. The light is still red, so I will start at the drop. I remember the taste of the air before I remember the faces. High Knot 3's atmosphere tasted like a dirty battery, sour, metallic, the kind of sting that sits behind your teeth and never leaves. They tell me I was unconscious for most of the transit from orbit, but I remember the burn-in well enough. The descent cradle around our squad, the rattle of the clamps, the way the harness cut into the soft places under my armor where the padding had worn thin. I remember the weight returning. At first, the suit's grav assist fought it, lifting a little off my spine. Then the software ceded control as we hit thicker air, and the cradle started to vibrate with atmosphere. It was a slow vibration, long and drawn out, the tone of metal resisting pressure. It sounded a lot like the swarm later, chewing its way through steel. We dropped through cloud at 700 meters per second. The exterior cameras showed nothing but yellow-black smear. Interior readouts said wind shear, chemical content, hull abrasion rates. It was just numbers. I watched them change and pretended that made it less like falling. The cradle slammed onto the pad with enough force to make my teeth click. Restraints released in sequence. Harness up, suit seal check, rail rifle link confirmed, heart rate 83, blood oxygen 96. I spoke no words. No one did. That was doctrine and habit both. Comms were for tactical packets, not for noise. When the ramp dropped, the world outside was a smear of industrial colors and bad weather. The pad was a disk of scorched composite at the foot of elevator spire 12, one of 16 that ringed the equator. The spire itself went straight up into the clouds, a dark pillar with red guidance lights winking faintly through the murk. Around it lay a city that was not a city, just refineries and conveyor lanes and tank farms laid out in grids. No windows, only vents and exhaust. Air temperature, 42 degrees Celsius. Visibility, 120 meters in closing. Acid index, lethal without protection in just under a minute. The suit filtered it down to something I could breathe, but each inhale still carried that burned battery taste. We deployed on schedule. 3rd Descent Company, 9 squads, staggered perimeter around the base of the spire and the attached cargo plazas. Civilians had already been moving upward for hours. The internal manifest said 23,000 bodies still queued for the lifts. Our job was simple on the display. Hold the spire for 12 hours against anticipated shard swarm harassment so the evacuation could complete and the coalition fleet could cut this rock loose. Simple on the display. Nothing ever is in the air. I stepped off the ramp and my boots sank half a centimeter into a layer of metallic dust and dead rain. The suit compensated for the weight of the rail rifle at my shoulder, the magazines at my hip, the ECM pod on my back. I could feel the mass but not the pull. It is strange what you get used to. The first hour was movement and placement. Kill boxes mapped on the HUD as ghost blue rectangles, fields of fire, overlapping lanes. Our recon drones went up as a gray cloud, then broke apart, each one taking a sector of sky or ground. Their composite feed painted the terrain into simple shapes on my visor, blocks for tanks, ribbons for conveyors, the spire's base a bright column of no fire zone. We advanced through alleys between storage vats, marking choke points, burning off the occasional corrosive puddle with plasma cutters. Reports came in over the command channel, swarm pressure heavy at Spire 5, moderate at 9, light at 16. 12 stayed listed as quiet. The word was meaningless. Quiet just meant it had not started yet. Every so often, the elevator's main car would thunder up the spine, a 100-meter slab of cargo and humanity wrapped in shell plating. The motion shook the ground and made fine dust flutter down from the support struts. Each lift took another few thousand off the manifests. The numbers dropped slowly, more slowly than the projected models. You can predict swarm behavior with some accuracy. You can predict human panic with less. At hour 2, the first anomaly appeared in the drone feed. Not a mass above ground, nothing dramatic, just a flicker in the subsurface LiDAR, a ripple under one of the runoff channels that sluiced excess solvents toward the pits. The recon software flagged it as structural instability. That was the official label. I tagged it manually as possible burrower and pushed the report up the chain. The acknowledgement came back with a nod code and nothing else. Hold positions, maintain perimeter, do not disperse forces. So we held. The air grew thicker, visibility narrower as the weather shifted and brought more particulate down around us. The suit filtered the particles out of my lungs, but the external pickups kept clicking with impacts. Static crawled at the edges of the HUD. I rechecked my ammo counts at 10-minute intervals. 8 magazines full, 1 partial, rail rifle coils nominal, suit power at 98%. We never saw the first locust wave coming. It was not a storm on the horizon. It was not a silhouette against the clouds. It started as a sound, low and granular, from somewhere below our boots. I felt it first to my feet, a faint vibration that did not match the rhythm of the elevator lifts. Then the maintenance gratings ahead of First Squad bulged. The gratings did not burst upward. They sank inward as if something beneath had chewed them hollow. We all watched the overhead feed as the mesh collapsed into a funnel and vanished. For a moment, there was only a hole. Then the glass locusts boiled out. They were not actually glass. That was just the name someone had given them because of how they caught the light, all facets and edges. Hundreds of fist-sized drones erupted from the runoff channel and fanned out in a low, clattering wave. Their composite exteriors reflected the city's sodium lamps in jagged sparks. Each one had 4 cutting limbs and a central core that housed their processors and microfabricators. They moved low, fast, and silent, except for that dry, metallic rustle. First Squad's front line opened fire by reflex. Rail rounds snapped the nearest wave into dust. The dust mattered almost as much as the bodies. The swarm could reconstitute from it if given time and mass. But killing them in clusters was the only way to keep them off the suits. The locusts reacted instantly. They skittered sideways, some diving back into the gutters, others leaping straight at the armor. A drone hit Private Eno's chest at 40 kilometers per hour and latched onto his suit plate. Its cutting limbs went to work on the seams. Another hit his knee joint. Another, his helmet rim. The suit's external mic sent the sound straight into my skull, a wet, grinding chew of ceramic and composite. We killed them. We killed a lot of them. Every shot that connected turned a locust into a burst of shards and fog. But there were too many, and they came from too many directions. Vents, drains, maintenance hatches that had been sealed years ago. The swarm had tunneled under us in silence while our attention stayed on the air. I watched Eno's suit indicators go from green to yellow to black in under 20 seconds. Biometrics flatlined. Suit integrity failed. Locusts flowed over him and moved on, leaving the shell behind like a husk. They only cared about live resistance and usable material. Command issued the expected order. Hold the line, maintain perimeter, protect the elevator base. They pushed a new icon to our HUD, an oval around the spire's foundations, red where the swarm pressed hardest. We fell back a controlled distance, trading ground for time. 3rd Descent Company's perimeter tightened, each squad anchoring off the next. We set up layers of overlapping fire in the alleys the locusts seemed to prefer. The elevator car thundered upward again. Another few thousand civilians gone, out of reach. That was the point. We just had to buy more time. The swarm adapted. It always does. The next wave did not come from the same channels. It came from behind, from the gaps between tank farms we had not considered primary access points. Subsurface tunneler units had chewed their way under an entire storage bay and surfaced in our rear, turning the open pad around the cradle into a grinding field. Their emergence threw up sheets of metal and stone that clanged off our armor. Locusts poured out in twin streams, splitting to hit both flanks. Our drones screamed overload warnings and dropped from the sky one by one, microblades lodged in their sensor clusters. Swarm priority shifted from structure to suppression. They wanted us blind. We fought in retreat, room by room, corridor by corridor. The refinery buildings had not been designed for infantry combat, let alone for suits the size of small vehicles. We forced ourselves through doorways and along catwalks, rail rifles bucking, each shot gouging tracks through the locust mass. When a macro form appeared, a drone the size of a cargo pod, all legs and cutting edges, we had to concentrate 3 squads' fire on it for a full 5 seconds before its core let go. The explosion took part of the catwalk with it. 2 more suits went down with the wreckage. All the while, the civilian count on the internal overlays dropped. 23,000, 21, 19. Each elevator cycle took a bite out of the number, but it was never fast enough. I do not know exactly when the outer ring failed. Our local feeds were saturated with swarm icons by then, big blocks of red pushing in from every direction. Spire 12's immediate perimeter held, but the adjacent sectors did not. The locusts swarmed over the conveyors and into the structural ribs of the elevator spine itself. The guidance lights along its length flickered as their systems took hits. The order came by way of a code I had never seen used before. It was not on the public doctrinal list. It overlaid the tactical map with a new shape, a tall cylinder encompassing half the elevator city, extending up into the clouds. Kinetic solution authorized. Brace. The timer on the cylinder's edge started at 90 seconds. We were 600 meters inside the projected kill radius. There was a discussion somewhere above me about whether we could be spared, whether the strike could be narrowed. If there was, it did not reach my channel. We received only the timer and a reiteration of priority. Protect the evacuation. Command's icon for friendly positions within the cylinder dimmed to a pale blue. That was when I understood. On some staff display in an orbital fire control center, 3rd Descent Company had already been written off as probable loss. I gave no orders to run. There was nowhere to run to. The atmosphere would scatter the rod's energy over a broad area, but the center would be enough to liquefy steel. Our best chance was cover, depth, and luck. We pushed inward, closer to the foundation of the spire, because that was the only direction that also matched our mission. Swarm pressure was highest there. It felt like walking into a storm with a second one falling from the sky. Locusts clawed at our legs. Macro forms clambered over pipe arrays above us, shedding shards as armor cracked. Rail rounds cupped and down, adding to the metallic snow. At 3 seconds to impact, all the sound seemed to drain out of the world. Broadband interference pegged. The suit cut external audio to protect our hearing. The elevator spine flashed white in my visor. A line in the clouds went black. Then the rod came down. From the ground, it did not look like a projectile. It looked like an act of subtraction. One moment, half the horizon was refineries and broken atmosphere. The next moment, a cylinder of light erased it. The shock wave hit us a heartbeat later, a wall of overpressure and heat. Structures between us and ground zero sheared sideways. The world tilted. My exosuit locked its joints and dug its boots into the deck as far as it could. The EMP arrived with the second wave. Systems blinked out. HUD went dark, then rebooted into degraded modes. Friend or foe tags vanished. Comms went to static. The only thing that stayed constant was gravity and the locusts. The rod had killed a vast number of them. It had also destroyed half our defensive grid and cracked the base of the spire. Through the haze and debris, I saw part of Elevator 12's support ring buckle and lean. It did not fall yet. Structural overlays listed its integrity as compromised, holding. That was a lie of optimism baked into the software. Everything was compromised. The civilian manifest recalculated. 17,000 evacuated, 6,000 still waiting. The next lift cycle stalled, warning icons stacked over the elevator's status indicators, power distribution failures, beacon misalignment. The kinetic strike had cauterized one wound and opened another. In the silence after the blast, the locusts resumed their sound. That grinding chew. They came in reduced numbers at first, then more, flowing around fresh craters and melted steel, adapting their approach. The destruction we had called down for their sake had created as many new avenues as it had filled. I do not know how many of us were left by then. My suit could only see what my own optics and degraded LiDAR picked up. 4 friendly IFF signatures in my immediate vicinity, flickering like candles, my squad's tech, an assault gunner, a medic, and 1 grunt whose name I had to pull manually from internal records because my HUD refused to show me his tag. We fell back into the shadow of the spire's foundations, using the broken remnants of the support structures as cover. Each step had to be monitored. The ground was punctured in ways the suit's auto balance could not predict. Locusts probed our flanks and dove at weak points. I lost part of my left shoulder plate to one that managed to wedge itself between overlapping armor. The suit's internal temperature climbed. It smelled like burned plastic and my own sweat. When we reached relative shelter beneath a collapsed cargo gantry, the tech specialist, Jane, finally got the local systems map back online. It appeared on my HUD as a wireframe maze of tunnels and conduits beneath the spire. The elevator complex went down as far as it went up. Energy feeds, coolant channels, emergency systems. One icon blinked amber instead of red or black. Auxiliary guidance, beacon, 12B, offline, intact, located 3 levels down in refinery, segment east. I remember Jane's voice in my ears then, not words, just the cadence of a brief, flat report. He laid out what the beacon was and what it meant. Redundancy for the main guidance array, capable of carrying the evac shuttle through atmosphere to a safe corridor, even if the primary systems were dead. I remember his breathing more than his sentences. It came in harsh bursts, same as mine. We had no active orders that covered this situation. Command was busy elsewhere or gone. The main beacon was fluctuating. The spire itself cracked, the swarm still gnawing its way inward. If the evac shuttle came in blind, it could fly into the densest concentration of locusts and never reach the pad. So the mission changed. It did not change by proclamation. There was no official adjustment. It changed because I was the highest-ranked soldier still standing in that pocket, and there was a blinking amber icon on my map that offered a narrower, more concrete task than hold until relief. We rerouted our path to the auxiliary beacon, down through maintenance access tunnels that had not seen human boots in years, maybe decades. The entrance was half-choked with debris and swarm fragments. We burned it clear with microcharges and ducked inside. The noise of the battlefield muffled as soon as the bulkhead closed behind us. The sound of the swarm did not disappear, it just moved into the walls. You could hear them in the piping and in the foreplates, a constant scrabble just on the edge of perception. The tunnel air was hotter, staler, filled with steam from broken coolant lines. My visor's internal readouts scrolled warnings about trace chemical content I could not pronounce. Suit seals held. For the moment. We advanced in single file, suit lights cut down to minimum. LiDAR pings kept short and narrow to reduce the chances of advertising our route. Jane moved second, eyes glued to the system's map, tracing the shortest route to 12B while also avoiding known swarm penetration points. The medic and the others watched our rear. I watched forward and thought about nothing. That is not entirely true. I thought about the evac manifest ticking away above my vision. I thought about the numbers that had not dropped in the last few minutes. The lift had stalled, or the count had frozen with the beacon. 6,000 remained. The software could not tell if they were still alive. We ran into the first tunneled breach halfway down the second level. A section of floor had simply vanished, eaten away from below. The gap was wide enough that a misstep would drop a man and his suit into a shaft full of locusts. LiDAR showed movement at the bottom like boiling water. I did not want to test whether my exosuit could climb out if it fell. Jane threw a bridge across the gap with 2 maintenance girders he found bolted to the wall. The suit servos complained at the weight, but they held. We crossed one at a time. When my boots hit the far side, the locusts surged upward in a spray, touching the underside of the girder. Metal dust rose like breath in cold air. We kept moving. I lost track of distance in meters. Time collapsed into a sequence of obstacles. The collapsed stairwell that forced us to cut a new route through a cable trunk. The gas pocket that burst into blue flame when a stray rail round hit it. The sudden lurch as part of the tunnel ceiling gave way and dropped the mix of concrete and dead locusts onto my shoulders. The suit took the shock. My spine felt it anyway. We passed bodies now and then, workers caught in the initial swarm incursion. Their suits were industrial, not military. Thin shells meant to keep the air out while they turned valves and checked gauges, not to withstand a cutting storm. Most of the bodies had been opened in neat, methodical patterns, their internal organs gone, the skeletons still holding shape inside torn fabric. The locusts did not waste material, they repurposed it. The medic muted his external cameras after the first 2. I did not. It made no difference either way. When we finally reached the beacon chamber, my suit clock said we had been underground for 74 minutes. That number feels short in retrospect. My memory stretches that walk into a longer span. Beacon 12B sat at the center of a circular room, suspended in its harness like a heart in the chest cavity. The chamber's walls were lined with power conduits and sensor arrays. Locust damage traced across them in jagged channels, but the core unit gleamed intact. The swarm had not prioritized it yet. They had been busy chewing on the main spire. Power status, marginal. Alignment status, offline. Structural integrity, nominal. Jane moved to the control pillar with the confidence of habit. This was his environment. He plugged his suit into the interface and began running bypass routines to bring the beacon online off the local grid. I watched the entrance. The others watched the walls. Swarm presence increased within minutes. You could hear them converging, responding to heat and noise and electrical activity. They tapped at the bulkheads like hail. A few found a vent and scratched at its grating. The sound made my teeth ache. Jane's progress bar crept up the side of my HUD. 20%. 30. The beacon hummed, a rising pressure in the air. If we had the time, if we had a clean environment, it would have taken seconds. With power fluctuating and half its connections melted, it took longer. Everything took longer down there. At 50%, the locusts breached. They did not pour through the door we had come in by. We had welded that shut. They came through a section of wall that had looked solid from our side. Tunneler units had hollowed it out and left only a thin skin. That skin ruptured in an inward burst of shards and dust. Drones poured through the gap like a liquid that hated us. We fell into the pattern we had learned on the surface. Controlled bursts, aimed for clusters, moved to deny them stable purchase on bare armor. The cramped space made swinging the rail rifles awkward. Half my shots gouged the walls instead of their bodies. Each miss added more shrapnel to the air. The medic went down first. A locust mackerel form, crab-like and low, launched itself at his legs from the side. Its cutting limbs took his left knee joint apart in one motion. He toppled, and the swarm followed him down. There are approved procedures for retrieving a downed comrade under swarm attack. None of them apply when you are in a room with one exit and an objective that will fail if you all die. I did not reach for him. I kept shooting. The software that tracks such things tells me I killed 109 drones in that room. I do not remember most of them. I remember the handful that got close, that clung to my forearm or my lower chest and started to chew. The suit's internal alerts flashed bright, then dimmed as damage control routines kicked in. Each time I had to choose between scraping them off with my free hand or trusting that a comrade would cover them while I fired at the swarm mass. Muscle memory made the decisions faster than thought. At 70%, Jane reported a power shortfall. I saw the numbers myself. The auxiliary grid could not sustain full beacon load and also maintain environmental safety. If we pushed the sequence through at current levels, the system would pull every watt it could find. The safeguards would trip. Overpressure would spike. Nearby lines would blow. In simple terms, we could either bring the beacon online or keep the room intact. Not both. I considered the equation. On the one side, 4 soldiers in a compromised space with a finite ammunition supply. On the other, an evac shuttle full of civilians and the strategic value of denying the swarm a clean target. It was not a hard problem. I told Jane to bypass the safeties. He did not argue. He stripped them out of the circuit like they were just another software layer, which they were. The beacon's hum climbed in pitch. I felt it in my teeth, then behind my eyes. The locusts reacted, some trying to withdraw, others throwing themselves harder against our position, as if drawn to the heat. Somewhere above us, the evac shuttle lit its engines and began its descent. I could see none of it. All I had was the beacon's readiness bar and the locust density map creeping toward saturation. At 85%, the first conduit blew. The explosion was not theatrical. It was a sudden gout of ionized gas from a seam in the wall, hot enough to scorch the outer layers of my armor. Safety algorithms tried to vent the pressure and failed. Another line burst, then another. The air filled with noise, hissing steam. The whine of overtaxed transformers, the grind of the swarm. Emergency environmental alerts screamed in the corner of my HUD. Toxic content rising, temperature climbing, oxygen mixture fluctuating as seals strained. I planted my boots and kept firing. The macro form that took my arm came in low, under the muzzle of my rifle, using the fog and the debris as cover. One moment my right arm was there, weight of the weapon balanced against the suit's servos. The next moment, something hit just above my elbow with the force of a small vehicle. There was a crunch and a skip in the force feedback loop, then no sensation at all. I saw my own arm on the floor in front of me, still encased in armor, rail rifle clamped in its dead hand. The macro form scuttled over it toward my torso, cutting limbs raised. Losing a limb is not like in the simulations. There is no neat fade to black at the edge of the wound. It is a jagged edge of sensation that shrieks, a mix of phantom and real pain. The suit filled the gap with rapid foam to prevent pressure loss. My body flooded with stim and analgesic. My vision tunneled, then snapped back and sharpened. I drew the monoknife with my remaining hand. The macro form bit into my chest plate. The knife bit into its joint. Its interior was not metal, not exactly. It was a lattice of composite and fluid and tightly packed processors, designed to resist damage from every angle but the ones no one anticipated, up close, under the main carapace, inside the arc of its cutting limbs. I found that angle by necessity. The blade slid in and met resistance, then pushed through. When I wrenched it sideways, the macro form seized and went still. Its weight pinned me for a moment. Jane's voice registered dimly in my ear, calling out a number, 98%. The beacon lit. The moment it came fully online, the world changed pitch. The humming resolved into a steady tone. The room's lights flickered and then stabilized at a harsh white. Above us, through tens of meters of concrete and metal, the beacon's guidance field cut a clear corridor through the stormed atmosphere and aligned it with the pad. Simultaneously, the overload I had authorized completed its circuit. The improvised EMP propagated outward along the same conduits we had been abusing. It surged into the refinery segments, leapt through their ground lines, and blossomed into a pulse that rolled across several hundred meters of complex. Locust drones froze mid-motion as their cores absorbed the shock. Some rebooted. Others never did. For a moment, the swarm density dropped like a stone. The immediate effect inside the room was less clean. Systems that were not meant to be part of the pulse still took the hit. The lighting failed entirely. Power to the emergency fans died. The air went still and heavy. The walls groaned. Somewhere in the distance, a structural support gave out. The sound of it propagated through the ground as a low, drawn-out crack. Dust drifted down in sheets. A chunk of something heavy fell onto the bulkhead above the tunnel entrance and wedged there. I could not see the evac shuttle, but the internal displays updated when the beacon linked to it. Flight path established. Atmospheric shear compensated. Guidance handoff complete. A small icon traced its descent and then its ascent, a clean arc through our projected kill zone. We had done the job. On the screen, it looked simple. A line drawn from orbit to ground and back again. The locusts were not gone. Enough of them had ridden out the pulse to continue eating. They found new paths. They always do. But the main current of the swarm had been disrupted long enough for the shuttle to pass. My own map markers flickered and then collapsed into minimal mode. Suit power dipped under 30%. Internal temperature rose past survivable ranges, then eased as the armor's outer layers started to delaminate from heat and the foam at my missing arm hardened. I lay there under the carcass of the macroform and listened to the swarm recede, if only slightly. The other suit signals went dark one by one. Jane lasted longer than most, his vitals ragged but present until a collapse in the tunnel cut his icon off from my map. At some point, the ceiling partially fell in, not directly on top of me, just enough to seal the primary exit and bury the beacon chamber in a new configuration of concrete and steel. The auxiliary systems continued to hum under the rubble. Beacon 12B had outlived its defenders. I do not remember losing consciousness. I remember intervals of awareness, the feel of heat cooling, of my own breath rasping shallowly in the helmet, of the metallic tang of blood mixing with the ever-present battery taste of Hinaut's air. Time lost shape. The suit went into full conservation mode. Displays dimmed to bare numbers. Heart rate, oxygen reserve, external pressure. Each ticked down at its own pace. At some later point, voices reached me again, not through standard comms, through a narrowband salvage channel, crackling and distorted. They bobbed at the edge of meaning like debris in a chemical sea. Cut here. One live. Do not disturb the core. When they pulled the macroform carcass off me and breached my visor, the air that came in was cooler but no cleaner. The medtechs patched me into a portable life support unit and hauled what was left of my body out through a tunnel carved by their own machines. I saw the sky exactly once before they loaded me onto the med shuttle. It was not really sky, just cloud and the faint outline of the elevator spire leaning at an unhealthy angle. The pad where we had landed was a crater now. The city beyond it was a field of twisted metal. In the distance, a chain of impacts marked where the rod strike had turned part of Hinaut 3 into glass. The evac manifest updated one final time in my suit memory before they wiped it for refit. 13,216 souls off-world. The rest remained on the planet, living or dead. The system did not say which. They tell me the swarm did not attempt a second full-scale assault on Spire 12. The loss of mass from the strike and our improvised EMP made other targets more attractive. The coalition managed 2 more lift cycles before they called the evacuation complete by their standards. Later, they abandoned Hainaut 3 entirely and designated it a machine exclusion zone. No one goes down there now unless they are in salvage and paid too little for the risk. That was 3 months ago, according to the barge's clocks. I have been here since in this grav-stabilized can hooked into the patrol fleet, breathing scrubbed air that still smells faintly of metal. They have replaced my arm with an interface socket for something I will probably never wear. They have done what they can for my lungs. They offer stimulant patches when the coughing gets bad. The war goes on elsewhere. Locust swarms hit new targets. Orbital rods fall on other cities. Sometimes I watch the operation reports scroll past on the common screens. More often, I do not. The psych tech says the recorder helps them decide if I am ready to go back to duty or if I should be rotated to rear support. He says that if I talk through what happened, it will help me process the trauma. I do not feel anything that needs processing. The events stack in my head in the same order they happened in the suit log. The only thing that does not fit neatly into the sequence is the sound. On the barge, the air scrubbers run continuously. They make a soft, granular noise in the bulkheads, a constant scrape and whir as they pull contaminants out of the atmosphere and cycle it back into something we can breathe. It is the sound of safety here, of life support. It sounds exactly like the swarm chewing through armor. At night, when the lights dim and the corridors empty, the hum of machinery and rushing filters fills the silence. Lying in my bunk, I can feel the vibration through the frame. If I close my eyes, I am back under the spire, listening to drones tap at the walls, waiting for the next section to give way. The recorder light just turned green. That is enough material, they will say. Enough to rate me on some scale, to decide if I am a liability or an asset. The battle for Spire 12 will occupy a line in some strategic archive, one engagement among thousands in a campaign that will never feel as big as it looks on the maps. For me, it is 4 sounds that never stop repeating. The cradle's vibration on the way down, the first grate collapsing under the locusts, the distant crack of the rod strike, and the soft scrape of air moving through ducts. Out the small porthole beside my bunk, Hainaut 3 is just a dark coin against the stars, a piece of rock with a dead halo of broken elevators. No one lives there now. The beacon we burned ourselves for still pulses somewhere under the ruins, sending a perfect, useless signal into an empty sky. I listen to the scrubbers and wait for the next war-shaped task to fill the hours. The end. The story powers down like systems entering a night cycle, one light at a time. Let your thoughts do the same. Rest,